Welcome to Deep Thoughts, a podcast designed to take you on an introspective journey into the mindsets and strategies that fuel personal growth. In every episode, we'll explore the intersection of psychology, spirituality, and real-world tactics, guiding you through powerful methods to elevate your health, wealth, relationships, and overall well-being. From deep dives into transformative habits and mindsets to candid discussions about the challenges we face in today's fast-paced world, Deep Thoughts is here to remind you of the untapped potential that lies within. If you're ready to disconnect from the distractions and connect with the tools and insights needed to create lasting change, this show is your sanctuary for self-discovery and empowerment. Tune in, reflect, and take action towards a more vibrant and fulfilling life.
Okay, listener, you sent over some research on stress, and wow, it really got me thinking differently about this whole idea of stress.
Really? How so?
Well, it's like we always hear stress is the enemy, right? But then I'm reading about this good stress, this eustress, and, well, frankly, it's got me curious.
Yeah, it's pretty fascinating stuff.
So let's just dive right in. What exactly is eustress? I mean, is it just stress with a positive spin?
It's more about changing how we see stress, like really reframing it.
Okay, so no more stress is bad mantra. What's the deal with this good stress, then?
Well, the term eustress itself goes back to the 70s. This endocrinologist, Hans Lai, came up with it. He took eu, meaning good in Greek, and combined it with stress.
So literally good stress, huh?
Exactly.
Okay, that makes sense word-wise, but what makes it good? Because, I mean, isn't stress usually, well, not so great?
It all comes down to how you react, how you perceive the situation.
Okay.
Eustress is when you're faced with a challenge and you feel this positive response, like excitement, motivation, even a feeling of, I can handle this.
So it's not so much about the stress itself, but how capable we feel in dealing with it.
You got it. It's all about perception. One of the articles you sent mentioned this conservation of resources theory. Basically, people who feel equipped to handle things, they have the time, the knowledge, support, they're more likely to experience challenges as eustress.
Interesting.
And get this, even during tough times like the COVID lockdowns, this still held true.
Wow, that makes a lot of sense. So it's like if you have a big presentation coming up, some people are dreading it, right? Classic bad stress. But others are thinking, bring it on. Same situation, totally different vibes.
Exactly. How you see the stressor, your belief in your ability to cope, that's what makes it positive or negative stress.
Okay, I'm starting to get this. So eustress is kind of like that feeling you get when you're about to ride a roller coaster. Like you're nervous, heart is racing, but it's good nervous,
I love that analogy. Yeah. Or think about exercise.
Yeah.
You're putting your body under stress, pushing your muscles, but then you get stronger, more resilient. It's the same with our minds and emotions. A little stress can actually be good for us.
One of the articles mentioned this Eustress-Dodson law. Sounds pretty official.
Yeah, it's a classic. Basically, it says there's a sweet spot for stress and performance. Too little stress, we get bored, unmotivated. Too much, we get overwhelmed, and our performance tanks.
So it's all about finding that balance.
Exactly. Eustress is about finding that point where we're challenged just enough.
Riding that wave, huh? I like it. So we know chronic stress is bad for our health, but what about this good stress, this eustress? Is it actually good for us in the long run?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? Even though good stress can be too much if it's constant, there's more and more research saying that eustress can be a real boost to our well-being.
Okay, I'm all ears. What kind of benefits are we talking about?
Well, for one, think of eustress as this awesome motivator. When we're facing a challenge that excites us, that feels manageable, it fuels our drive to succeed.
It's that I've got this feeling, and that feeling can show up in all parts of life, right? Not just work or big challenges, but like trying a new hobby, finally tackling that project we've been putting off.
Absolutely. Eustress can be a huge driver of personal growth. It's that nudge to get out of our comfort zones, embrace new challenges.
So we're building up our resilience muscles by facing and conquering these challenges.
Exactly. One article even called it stress inoculation, which I love. Taking on these manageable challenges regularly, it's like giving our minds a stress vaccine. We build up immunity to handle bigger things down the road.
It's like we're giving our minds a little workout, right? Building up that mental strength.
Exactly, building that resilience.
So this is all about resilience. Some of the research you sent also talked about eustress and creativity. What's the connection there? Like, can a bit of pressure actually make us more creative?
It's pretty amazing, actually. More and more research is showing that a good dose of stress can really get those creative juices flowing, especially when it comes to problem solving.
So instead of stress frying our brains, it's more like it's firing them up.
You got it. Think about those aha moments, when you're stuck on a problem and then suddenly, boom, the solution hits you. Those moments often happen when we're under a little bit of pressure.
Right, like we need that little push.
Exactly. Or think about artists and musicians. They often do their best work when they're feeling the heat of a deadline or a performance.
That makes sense. There's a certain energy, a focus that comes with knowing you need to deliver. It's like that pressure forces you to think differently.
Yeah. And that focus, that engagement, it can really get those creative breakthroughs happening. One of the articles even talked about Csikszentmihalyi's concept of flow state, which is really connected to eustress.
Oh yeah, flow state. I remember reading about that. It's like that feeling of being totally absorbed in something where you lose track of time, you're in the zone.
That's it. And flow often happens when we're doing things that challenge us just enough, Not too easy, not too hard.
Right, finding that sweet spot.
Exactly. And that lines up perfectly with what we were saying earlier about the Yerkes-Dodson law, that sweet spot for stress.
So flow is like the Eustress zone.
I like that.
Okay, so how do we get into that zone more often? How do we find more of those flow state experiences?
Well, it's about finding the things that light you up, that challenge you in a way that feels exciting, not overwhelming. It doesn't have to be something huge either. It could be as simple as starting a new hobby that gets your creative juices flowing, or finally learning that skill you've been putting off.
Yeah, like something that gets you really engaged.
Exactly. It's about finding those things that bring you into that state of flow, that sweet spot of eustress.
This all sounds amazing, but
Yeah.
there's got to be a limit, right? Where does that eustress tip over into, okay, this is too much? How do we find that balance?
That's the million-dollar question. And it really is a balancing act. One of the most important things is self-awareness. Paying attention to how your body and mind are reacting to different kinds of stress.
Like noticing the warning signs that we might be pushing too hard.
Exactly. Are you feeling energized and motivated by a challenge? Or are you starting to feel burned out, depleted? Are you getting enough sleep? Making time for yourself? These are all important things to keep in mind.
It's about knowing our own personal stress limits, right? And respecting them.
Exactly. What feels exhilarating to one person might totally overwhelm someone else. It's about being in tune with how you feel and adjusting accordingly.
So even good stress can become too much if we're not careful. Are there any practical things we can do to make sure that eustress stays beneficial? What can our listener do to stay on the right side of that line?
One of the articles you sent talked about having good coping mechanisms, for dealing with stress in general.
So it's not just about chasing that eustress high, but being able to handle whatever life throws at us. Right?
Yeah, exactly. It's like having a whole toolbox of stress-busting strategies that you can pull out when you need them. Things like, exercise, getting out in nature, mindfulness, or even just losing yourself in a hobby.
So all those things I do to unwind, those actually help build up my stress resilience too. That's awesome.
Exactly. And like we were saying before, everyone's different. What helps one person might not do it for another. It's about finding what works for you.
It's about being intentional, I guess, right? Like choosing challenges that really matter to us, knowing our own limits, and making time for ourselves so we can actually handle those challenges. This has been a real eye-opener, We talk about stress like it's this thing to avoid at all costs, but maybe it's more about changing how we think about it.
Yeah, absolutely. It's not about pretending stress doesn't exist because, let's face it, it does. But it's about realizing that stress, in the right amounts and with the right mindset, can actually be a good thing.
Stress as a superpower, not a supervillain. I love it.
That's the idea.
So, for our listeners today, what's the one thing you hope they take away from all of this?
I think the biggest thing is realizing that you have more control over your stress than you might think. By understanding the difference between good stress and bad stress, recognizing your own triggers, and having those coping mechanisms ready to go, you can really change how you experience stress.
Instead of letting stress control you, you can learn to use it to your advantage.
Exactly.
Wow, this has been incredible. So much to think about. So listener, next time you're feeling that pressure building, take a moment to check in with yourself. Ask yourself, is this pushing me to grow or is it dragging me down? Who knew stress could be our friend? Until next time, keep diving.
Thank you for tuning in to this episode of the Deep Thoughts Podcast. I hope you found insights and inspiration to take with you on your journey of self-growth. If you enjoyed the show, be sure to hit the subscribe button so you never miss an episode. And don't forget to follow us on social media to stay updated on new releases and exclusive content. See you next time, where we'll continue to help you grow and explore your full potential.